Welcome, everyone, to the webinar. My name is Will Smith. I'm the host of the podcast Acquiring Minds. Today's topic is SMB cybersecurity, why searchers and operators need a risk assessment. And our hosts are key members of the team at Inzo Technologies, President and CEO Nick Akers, and security engineer Rick Poindexter. Rick has a CISSP designation, which for people who know cybersecurity know that it is the gold standard. Inzo is a full-service IT managed service provider to other businesses. Nick acquired the business, so he is a former searcher himself. He understands entrepreneurship through acquisition, ETA, deeply, personally, and he was a guest on Acquiring Minds, probably a couple years ago now, Nick. Inzo also works with many searchers, now owners, as clients. I'm going to hand the mic over to Nick in just a minute. Before I do, our usual housekeeping. We are recording the session, so you'll receive a link to the recording as well as a link to the slides in your inbox probably later today, if not tomorrow. And second, if you have a question, use the Q&A function. We have chat turned off for these webinars, but put your questions in the Q&A and we'll see those and we'll have the official Q&A section at the end of the presentation. But if it's a burning question, maybe we'll interrupt Nick to ask it. And then finally, a couple of links in the chat here for you guys. You can email Nick at inzotechnologies.com. And then, of course, you can learn about Inzo at their website, inzotechnologies.com. And with that, Nick, please begin.
Thanks, Will. Appreciate that introduction, and thanks for everyone taking time to spend an hour with us here this afternoon. Before I begin, I just want to say, thanks to Will very much for this opportunity and talking to his audience. If you sense any amount of nervousness from me, which would not be normal, it's because, I want to do a real good job for Will. We know how much he's contributed to this space and all of our learnings. So appreciate that, Will.
Thank you for that, Nick.
So let's get into the presentation here. The agenda, I'm going to give you a lot of real-world examples of what is happening with cybersecurity threats in small and medium-sized businesses, and then some ways we help protect those businesses and a few things that hopefully you can implement right away to help. So we'll cover why small businesses and particularly newly acquired companies are becoming more and more of a target for cyber criminals. We'll go through a couple how attacks happen step by step so you understand the way criminals get into your business. We'll touch, of course, on AI. How could you not at this point? But AI is rapidly accelerating what is going on in cyber attacks. We'll cover some of the legacy issues that we're going to find in the types of businesses that we're buying. Why antivirus and an internal resource is no longer enough. Definitely cover cyber insurance, what it covers, why you should need it, and how to make sure your claims don't get denied. Hopefully have a few good examples in what we're doing specifically for ETA and some of the unique things that we're experiencing there. And then we'll cover cybersecurity risk assessment, what it is, why it's important, and then again, some things that hopefully you can take away with real value for you today. So why should you listen to us, Inzo Technology, and me specifically? We're getting a lot of experience in the ETA community. Obviously from my background in the space, I think we all experience some unique challenges when we acquire these legacy businesses. We're seeing that getting a lot more experience to be of value to you as a partner there. And again, because I've done this, I know how hard it is to accomplish one, but then after closing, how hard it is to run the business. And hopefully that direct experience between us adds value in the conversation. But on top of that, we are on the leading edge of cybersecurity. You heard Rick's fancy certification. I wouldn't say that it's completely uncommon to find an expert like that with that certification in a managed service partner, but it's not the norm. And we actually have two individuals with that certification. All of our folks are first trained on cybersecurity, but we have real in-house expertise. And what we do is we proactively monitor, detect, and respond to threats that can cause disruption in your business. We do that with advanced technology and human oversight. And we also really educate and empower our clients and your teams to recognize and stop potential threats. One of the things I always like to highlight for folks is I think my business is at a real sweet spot in terms of size and capability to serve partners like you. A lot of MSPs are going to be very small. They might have 4, 5, 6 people on staff. We have 40. Not only does that give me the resources in people, it gives me the resources in revenue to invest in the best enterprise grade cybersecurity tools. So, and to contrast that to very large private equity owned MSPs, we know what game they're playing. They're probably not as focused on customer service the way somebody like we will be. So here's some real examples of things that we have done with searchers in their businesses. Most commonly, the first engagement is a pre-purchase analysis of the existing environment and providing a due diligence report. We'll cover that for you later. Another super common one, of course, where you're likely walking into a very old and aging IT infrastructure. So we'll do a complete revamp, rip and replace, get modern equipment in there. Again, this one is very common. Migration of the existing Microsoft or perhaps Google business licensing into the way it should properly be done. So if you know anything about Microsoft licenses, I'm going to try to not get in the weeds here, but if you have the consumer grade license like an E1 or E3, you don't have a lot of the options to enable the current cutting edge cybersecurity posture with those cheaper licenses. So we look at that, make some specific recommendations, get you on the right proper licensing. We've talked to several folks that have been coming out of an existing cybersecurity issue and they need help recovering the business. We've been involved in that. Here's a good one. I always like this one. We recently did a migration from AOL to a business Gmail account. So when the searcher bought this business, all of the business emails for years, tens and tens of thousands of emails were in AOL. And my goodness, so we had to migrate them into a real business environment. That was a fun project. It was actually fairly complicated. And then, of course, engage on full managed services and a cybersecurity stack. And we also do voice solutions, a cloud voice product. So you'd be surprised in some audiences, they will think that they're too small to be a target. That's a number one myth that gets businesses in trouble because 43% of cyber attacks are targeting small businesses because they know that they're likely very vulnerable. 61% of small businesses were targeted by a cyber attack. A large majority of the social engineering attacks target small customers as opposed to large companies. And then ransomware is a big threat to the smaller businesses. I feel like a theme of this presentation is like 60% of the time it works every time. There's a lot of percentages in this one. So some statistics on costs of an attack. Now, these aren't all cash costs. This is, downtime costs, people costs, insurance. It adds up very quickly, even for a small business. And we've seen this. I'm going to give you some real examples where, an attack on a small business can cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars cash. And then, the downtime costs just start racking up from there. And then you think about being shut down, loss of productivity, and everything that goes into a recovery, you could start incurring, $50,000 plus per hour to get out of this. There's other issues. Again, we've seen all of these examples: losing customers, regulatory fines, reputational damage, employee productivity loss, and increased insurance premiums. I went through a cyber attack when I was working at the company that I left to go do a search. It wasn't a terrible one, but we lost email capabilities for 3 days. So for 3 whole days, our business email was down. So that made a lot of people not productive. The data backups were not properly in place. So we lost literally half of the historical data for the company. The accounting lost all of their data, literally all of it. And, just one of the things that came as a result of that is our CFO quit. He was so frustrated, he just quit. So these things happen and have real consequences. I thought these two recent articles were pretty interesting and relevant to our audience. So you're seeing, and it's being documented how attackers are targeting M&A activity. And so why is that? One, when a business is acquired, there's a lot of press releases, so it causes attention. They also know, these cyber criminals know, that when we are coming in as the new operator, we're very distracted, right? We're trying to put together and run our 100-day, first 100-day plan, and our focus is elsewhere, creates the vulnerability. And that's one of the reasons you see more and more attacks specifically targeting what we're all up to. So again, these are examples, some specific examples we've seen. So small accounting firm, phishing is very common. I'm going to give you some more details around that. Employee clicks a fake link, hackers gain access to records, financial data, and then results in losing clients, a lot of fees in recovering the data, and legal fees. We've seen it with even law offices fall victim to this, get ransomware, they lock all their data down, have to pay a big fine to get it unlocked, causes downtime. And again, you see employees leave as a result of these frustrations. Manufacturing is a big target. So here's an example. Again, we have seen this. Hackers impersonate the CEO via email, change the wiring instructions, and then the money's out the door before anybody knows what's going on. We had a client come to us in this exact situation where the CEO and the CFO's emails got hacked in an exchange with them. The wiring instructions got changed, and about $150,000 for them went right out the door. So let's talk. Phishing is a very common one. So you may know how it works, but let's just talk about it in detail so you see how quick this goes. It happens where an employee receives an email that appears to come from a legitimate source like Microsoft 365, your bank, or a vendor, and it has real branding and some credible call to action. We've all seen the one where your password expires today. But then you see more sophisticated one, invoice overdue, or something that actually seems very legitimate. And then the employee clicks that link. They then land on a login page that looks identical to what they really should be logging into. Like, it's going to look like your bank, or it's going to look like your Microsoft account. Then the employee enters their username and password, and then they have it. So then the attackers take that real login, go to the real account, the real bank or the real Microsoft, and now they can log in. They can change, then they start changing things within that account. They change the inbox rules, change the forwarding rules. That's how they get into these email exchanges, and then start capturing data. So by using the employee's mailbox, the attacker emails clients, vendors, finance team. They're emailing everybody, trying to find that vulnerability and who is going to give them the link to getting money out of the business. That all happens very, very quickly. It can happen as fast as 10 minutes, and the damage can get done before you even know what has happened. Let's just look at ransomware. That's another common one. It follows a similar process, but their goal is a different outcome. So again, it's that initial access via a phishing email, an exposed RDP port. What that means is how you're remote accessing back into the business. Maybe you're working from home. Unpatched vulnerabilities. I haven't said this one yet, but you're going to hear it in later slides. This is a really simple thing to protect yourself, but not a lot of people are paying attention to it. So then once they get in, they map the networks, they find the servers, they identify backup locations, then they start gathering all of that sensitive data, because at some point they're going to detonate their ransomware, which means they're going to steal or otherwise lock down and encrypt all your data so you can't access it, but they have it, and then the business operations stop. And of course, they hold this for ransom until you pay. And at some point, you're probably going to have to pay, otherwise your business is going to shut down. So these things happen very quickly. The ransomware is a little bit longer because they're in an information gathering mode for a while to find out what's really important to you before they actually execute the plan. So let's touch on AI. We're all sick of talking about AI, but this is a big deal now. This one, the AI voice cloning. there was a recommendation out recently where we shouldn't even be using our voice on our voicemail, like on our cell phones. We all leave the, hey, this is Nick, leave me a message type thing. Because just with that 5, 8, 10 seconds, they can clone your voice almost identically. And then there's a lot of things that they can use your voice for. Um, of course, they're using AI to perfect their phishing emails to make them look as real as possible. Not in the old days like there were misspellings and easy to catch. Again, the voice is really, I think, where we're going to see this ramp up a lot, because by having your cloned voice, they can really kind of get over that trust barrier very, very quickly. And this has happened. We haven't experienced this, but I've seen the real stories where now they're deep faking video calls. So they might impersonate the CEO or some other high level person, either on an internal video call, or they're talking to the bank or whatever it is. But the deep fake is so real that it then convinces the person on the other end to do the thing they want. Right. So think about it. You have a very convincing version of the CEO talking to some employee that's not likely to question the CEO. It, this stuff gets pretty scary pretty fast. So, of course, this is projected to be a big deal here in the next few years. So, more ways. I don't want to bore you with all these ways, just to show you some other things. Supply chain is a big one. Impersonating your supply chain. We've seen that multiple times now. That's an easy one to trick folks. Insider threats, whether it's intentional or not. One searcher that just acquired a business and is coming to us now with cybersecurity. When he walked into his business, there was a little piece of paper on the board in the break room with all the passwords handwritten on it. So everybody in the company could walk by and get the passwords anytime they wanted. Another good one, a different searcher just acquired the business, and all of the passwords for that company are on an employee's personal Gmail account in a shared Google document that they share with the other employees in the business. So, I mean, like the bank passwords were on this, literally all the passwords in a personal Gmail account. So, these are some of the examples when you come in and you acquire these legacy businesses, they're not going to be up to date on their cybersecurity. Okay, almost there with some solutions for you. So we've talked about this: phishing, ransomware, business email compromise. Those are kind of the three most common things you're going to see these days. So what are some solutions to this? Why does the old way not work? Of course, we've all heard of antivirus. A lot of these businesses, when you talk to them and you're doing your due diligence, the owner is going to say they have antivirus. Well, that's kind of a very passive approach, and it's certainly not state of the art. It only catches known threats. It doesn't stop these phishing emails from tricking employees. It's not actively monitoring your environment. That's why I say it's passive and it's not active. So what real protection looks like is, we deploy monitoring tools. So we're seeing what's going on in your environment 24/7. So again, that's monitored with the tool itself. There's a lot of AI learning, and then we layer on, of course, our human interpretation of what's happening. You can have advanced email filtering and phishing protection. Big one is the multi-factor authentication. You're now going to start hearing me referring to this MFA quite a lot. We also do employee security awareness training. So a lot of active things for them to engage in, a lot of training that they can do on their own time. It's really obviously important to train the people. We look at the backup of your data and the disaster recovery to make sure that it's not only backed up, but you can actually recover from it if you need to. And then the vulnerability patching and management. Some companies might have an IT resource on staff. I haven't seen it too much in companies being acquired through ETA, but perhaps it's a bigger one and they do have somebody on staff. That's great. But we know the limitations of just having one person that's responsible for something. You're not going to have the 24/7 coverage. You most likely, there's going to be skill gaps, right? So Rick, he's specialized in cybersecurity. these on-staff IT folks are going to be very generalist and probably not up to current standards. Single point of failure. Big one is divided attention, right? So what are these on-staff IT folks doing? They're resetting passwords, they're fixing the printer, they're helping people log in. So they're doing a lot of different things all day long as opposed to being just dedicated on cybersecurity. And that's what a partner like a company like ours does. Let's talk about cyber insurance real quick because this is an important topic. So you should have cyber insurance. I've seen it work. I've seen it help people that have had a problem. You just want to be sure that you comply with the policy. So insurance will cover you for data breach response and the costs associated with that. It can help you on paying ransomware to cover some of those costs. You can, of course, have insurance for business interruption losses. It will cover some amount of legal defense and regulatory fines. And also forensic investigation costs. So again, I've seen this work. We had a searcher come to us after an incident and their insurance was already involved and paying for forensic investigation. So it is worth having. The real problem is a lot of these claims are getting denied, and they get denied because you're not in compliance with the policy. These policies are complicated. It really helps if you have a partner like us help you complete the questions in the policy to make sure that your claim doesn't get denied. The biggest way you're going to get denied in one of these claims is not having, again, that MFA, that multi-factor authentication enabled, right? So if you don't have that enabled, you have a breach. It's going to be one of the first things they look at. You don't have it on, they're just going to deny. So again, not many small businesses have cyber insurance. I would encourage you to take a look at it. Just be sure that you're complying with the policy. So again, we talked about this. What are some of the things that will get your claim denied? No MFA, not understanding, it might not be intentional misrepresentation on the application, but they ask very, very technical questions and you need to know how to answer that. So again, having a partner like us help walk you through that to make sure you're filling it out appropriately is important. Documented employee training is another one they're going to look at. So you might have some of this stuff in place, but do you have training for your employees? And do you have that documented to fall back on? Again, that's something we can provide you pretty much right out of the box. And then you have to report these things within a certain time period. Unpatched systems, talked about that again. This is simply like doing the updates. It's on a more sophisticated level, but that's basically the concept. Every time Microsoft pushes out an update, you need to adopt those. Okay. So finally, what's it like working with us? Again, one of the things that I really talk a lot about our folks is customer service. When I bought the business almost 3 years exactly, we've since doubled in size in terms of revenue and employees. We have about 40 employees now. Some of our activity has been recognized. One very simple thing that I point out is we live answer our phones. Most IT companies that you're going to interact with, they're going to want you to interact via email or some ticketing system. Of course, we have that too, but when you're having an issue, either small or big, sometimes you just want to get somebody on the phone and we live answer the phone for you. Let's get to some specifics in the ETA community. There's a couple things that I want to highlight that we do both pre-close and post-close. One, as I mentioned it at the top, is we have an IT due diligence questionnaire and a report that you can use in your pre-close due diligence phase. Just like any of the other due diligence things you're working on, this is a fairly detailed questionnaire. We can help walk you through it if needed. And the result is you're going to get a report from us with ranked risk and opportunities that you can use however you like it. Some people have found that they're going to have to incur a significant amount of hardware costs because they have to replace all the old laptops or whatever it is. They might use that in some of their negotiation with the seller, or at a minimum, you at least know post-close you're going to have this cost that you weren't necessarily thinking about. So we found this to be really useful for folks in the due diligence phase. And of course, you would sequence this more towards the end when you're getting closer to close. It's important, but of all the due diligence items, we know there's other really important ones. The cybersecurity risk assessment, this is a post-close activity I'm going to cover in a little bit more detail. And then, of course, general IT managed services. Look, if you haven't got there yet, you're going to learn that running a business is very hard. And so running your IT should not be one of those hard things that you have to deal with. So again, just a couple more comments on the pre-close due diligence questionnaire. We can assist you getting it filled out if necessary. Some searchers will just hand it over to the sellers and see what we get back. Others will have us walk the sellers through it. It's really up to you what you think makes sense. If we were doing this outside of the ETA community, we would do this as a paid engagement but for this community, for the ETA, just in general, I know how hard it is to get any of this stuff done. So I'm happy to provide this for you for free. So let's get into this cybersecurity risk assessment. This is a comprehensive evaluation of the security posture of your business. So this is something we would do post-close. You would find a lot of companies like mine that say they will give you a risk assessment and do a free scan. That is very surface level. It's not going to give you a lot of information. When we say comprehensive and thorough, we mean it. And I'm going to give you some examples. Coming out of this, you're going to get a lot of data that identifies and prioritizes your risk, how you can protect your assets, how you comply with regulation, and improve efficiency in the business. You will get concrete information. Does your team right now, will they enable a further cyber attack? Meaning, have they been trained on what to do and not to do just in their normal day-to-day jobs? We'll see, do cyber criminals know who you are? We can see who is looking at your website, what countries they're coming from, what data they're trying to get. So you can see if people are actively looking at you. Another one, we can see where your passwords are. So specifically, do you have compromised passwords that exist on the dark web that people are buying and trading? We can get that level of detail. And again, we can see like what IP address folks are coming from, and does it seem legit or not? And should you be concerned right now? So kind of the framework of what a cybersecurity risk assessment looks like and the outcome is we focus on 4 key areas. Of course, protect the people, get them trained, protect the process. This is more on the technology side. Protect, again, the technology, the tools and the infrastructure that runs the business, and then the data. These are the 4 areas that we focus on. How long would it take? So this is a part where, again, I want to emphasize the thoroughness of what we do versus kind of the free, let us scan your network type thing. It starts with a very quick introductory call, as you might expect. Then we do kind of a more in-depth second call to get the first round of detailed information. Once we have that, this is where we do the real risk assessment. And it takes 30 days. So again, when I mean thorough, it's thorough. This involves not only kind of the technology aspect of all the scans we would do, but it involves the people aspects of interviewing you, the key leaders, and others on your team to understand how you think about technology as part of your business. From there, we give you the presentation of findings, again, very thorough, and then we'll have a recommendation of a course of action based on what we find. I'll give you one example. We just completed one of these for a hospital. So you think hospitals would be fairly sophisticated in this. And one of the tests we do is a fake phishing campaign, right? So we send out these fake phishing emails to employees to see, are they going to click it or not? And I forget the exact number, but it was something along the lines of like 80 to 90% of employees opened the email. So they opened the email. And then of the 80 or 90% that opened the email, all of them clicked the link. Like every single one of them fell for it, which is just a shocking finding. So these things do give you real results that probably will scare you. Okay, let me leave you with the one thing, and then we're almost done. Hopefully some tips you can take from this that you can implement now. Biggest one, go turn on MFA on everything. That's the biggest single step you could take to protect yourself right now. Test your backups if you have the ability to do that, to make sure they're valid, they're up to date, they're being done daily. Ideally, you want a physical on-prem version married to the cloud. So you have on-prem and a cloud version, and also tests that you can restore from them. You can run a phishing simulation. There's some free ones out there if you wanted to give it a shot just to see what happened with your employees. The ones we do are much more sophisticated, but you could give that a shot. Update everything, right? So check your operating systems, your software, your firmwares. This is another one. I would say after MFA, this is probably the biggest opportunity on a way to protect yourself. Review who has admin access. There's this concept of apply least privilege. Employees should only have access to what they need for their job. This is some of the examples I gave earlier where passwords are available for everybody. Everybody has admin rights. That's a really bad situation. Do the risk assessment. That'll give you real insight. You can't fix what you don't know. And again, none of us like to add expense to our business. I get it, but I believe cybersecurity liability insurance is something worthwhile for you to consider. Another thing we'll circulate this, I've referenced this IT due diligence discovery questionnaire. Email me, I'll give you a copy. We could probably get it circulated for you. So that's one piece, hopefully, of useful takeaway. And then if you want to book a meeting with me, you can shoot this code. It's a real code, I promise. It's not a risky code. And then, yeah, my email's in there. Certainly feel free to email me. I'm happy to be helpful on this or any other ETA topics that I can. So that's it. I appreciate the time, and Will, I'll turn it over to you for any questions.
Awesome. Nick, thank you very much for the presentation. I think we all feel sufficiently chilled and exposed after hearing the many ways that we are all vulnerable. Audience, just put Nick's email back into the chat again for you in Inzo's URL website. Okay, that was great, Nick. Really a great primer on this subject. Bunch of questions. I have some questions. Let's start with audience questions. Wes asks, how much company vulnerability extends into personal assets? So taking home laptops, et cetera. And does your service extend into that home environment, at least for the owner, if not for the key employees?
Yep. So, I suspect a lot of these questions could be individually 15 to 30-minute answers. So I'm just going to hit some highlights for you. And then if you want to get into some more details, just send me an email. Myself and Rick will be able to help you out. So a couple layers to this. One, I would certainly recommend don't let anybody use their personal device, even the owner. Get that separated. I've seen it many times, and it's not surprising when you buy these smaller businesses where people are using their personal laptop. It's just not good. So I would start there. Of course, we're all working remote a lot of the time, so people are taking company-owned devices home. There are a couple ways to deal with that. One is everybody has to log in via VPN if they're accessing something back at headquarters. So that's part of it. The other part is to get on cloud-based versions of all the tools that we use, right? So Office 365, SharePoint, get out of accessing data locally, get it into a proper business cloud environment. That'll be a real big step there. Cell phones, I get it. We don't all want to buy and distribute company-owned cell phones, so maybe people are using personal cell phones. There are similar approaches to protect the company data on those devices to keep it kind of locked down, whether it's a VPN or app-specific use. So there's ways to deal with this. Yes, I agree with you. It is a area of threat, but it can easily be addressed.
Great. Nick, could you go back to your slide of stuff we can do now?
Sure.
7 things you can do this week. Great. So one to your anecdote about the passwords on the refrigerator or whatever it was on the whiteboard.
Yeah.
um, it's possible. I know an organization who has all their passwords in a Notion doc that most people have access to. What is the best practice today for sharing account access? Um, one of the realities these days is that a way that a small business owner saves costs is not giving everybody in the organization their own Notion subscription. People share subscriptions just like people and families share their Netflix subscriptions. And so therefore these passwords need to be need to be passed around. What's the best practice on that one?
Yeah, so definitely a password manager, right? There's a lot of these out there now. They're not that expensive. As you could imagine, in my business, passwords and customer passwords are very important to how we run the business, right? So if I have 10 different network engineers over there and a customer has a problem, they have to be able to log in. Any one of those 10 people needs to be able to log into the server at the customer, right? So that means passwords have to be available to all of those folks. So we use, super high level password managers to allow that type of access, but keep that important data protected. So that's certainly one way. That's the way you should do it. Look, again, I get it. We all don't want to add a bunch of layers of cost into our businesses. There's probably some types of services where having a shared account, it's not some business critical service, like my podcast software, for example, that we use for our own podcast. A couple people can log into that to set appointments or whatever. If that gets compromised, my business isn't going to go down. But I'm certainly not going to set up multiple people on to be able to log into my email or whatever, some other critical business system. So
Yeah.
sure, we're all going to do things like that, but just think it through before doing it.
Yeah.
And I would also throw in, if you don't mind, Nick, make sure that when you're in a situation like that, that you're not throwing all security to the wayside, right? Like, yeah, you might be committing a small security blunder by sharing the account, but still have MFA on it. You can share the MFA token across multiple devices usually. Don't throw all other security out with the whole bucket.
Great. Nick, Brad asks, what's your opinion of small businesses using Google products instead of Microsoft? Questioner Brad is a Microsoft guy, but a lot of the youth seem to love Google, and maybe it's cheaper. I don't know. He says. I think this is less a security question and more of just which is a better product or solution question.
Yeah, no, sure. Appreciate the question. Yeah, we don't have to keep this to cybersecurity questions. We're a full service IT business partner, so other IT questions, just throw them out there. We're getting more and more customers that want to do Google Business. And I think it's really just personal preference. I mean, I wouldn't say one is better from like a security standpoint at this point. But it's funny, I just hired a young person on our staff and we're a Microsoft shop. Um, and this young person, once we got her logged into all of our tools, she said, I've never seen Outlook. I've never used it. This is foreign to me. She had never used Microsoft products.
Yeah. I think Microsoft probably has a boomerish reputation. I use, I've been using Microsoft since forever, but yeah, there's probably an age thing there.
I will say it's
Uh,
easy to have Google Suite stuff configured insecurely, whereas Microsoft will usually hold your hand a little bit in that
mm,
regard. So it's not that one is more necessarily more secure than the other. You can certainly be secure on G Suite, but it's easier to be insecure on G Suite.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Good. And just to underline what Nick said, everybody, this webinar is about cybersecurity, but Inzo is not a cybersecurity firm. They offer cybersecurity as part of their umbrella of IT services. Fair, Nick? Yeah.
Yes.
Great. Here's a good one. What types of risks do you usually see in blue collar industrial type services businesses? Yeah, because obviously blue collar type businesses are more common than white collar businesses as acquisition targets in ETA land, and also you can just imagine that there are more passwords per capita or accounts per capita in a white collar business versus a blue collar business. Do you guys, is there anything worth noting in those two different types of businesses?
Yeah, I mean that's a good, insightful question. What you're going to see, at least what I've seen in the blue collar businesses, is it's similar in theme, right? You're going to see the shared password. You're going to see all this stuff that we've talked about, but it's probably going to be at a much smaller scale in terms of you might have a 40-person uh, paving company or whatever it is, but only 5 people are working in the office, right? You might only have 5 laptops. Everybody else doesn't use any of this stuff. So the risk is there, but perhaps on a little bit smaller scale. It doesn't mean you shouldn't address it. Of course you should. And that example that I gave of all the passwords being in somebody's personal Gmail account was a blue collar business. Um, there's another part of the story. So, I'm having the conversation with the owner, the new owner, and, getting him sufficiently scared about people having his bank password. And then, we were just casually talking and he threw out, and also we just started a website for the company. First time ever. We just put up a website. And I was like, you have to let me fix this password thing for you right now, because now all of a sudden you amplified your signal to the world, because now you have a website out there for the first time ever. People can now find you, and maybe you've got a press release going on about the acquisition, but you just became, perhaps went from invisible to visible. So again, blue collar, smaller, different, but yeah, of course, there's still risk there.
But also your point about, that savvy hackers recognize that there's a soft underbelly in a moment of transition. Yeah.
Yeah, and just a couple other thoughts. Perhaps in blue collar, you're much, much more likely to run into an antiquated environment where people are using personal Gmail. They're all sharing the same Microsoft retail license. So it's probably potentially much more behind the times on that point. I will just to turn away from the cybersecurity for a second. One of the things we see a lot in blue collar is the field team, the field salespeople, service people are using their personal cell phones. And what happens, of course, is whoever is calling that person, maybe it's the customer talking to the salesperson that they've done for years. It's all in their personal number. So when those employees leave, you lose that relationship because it's on that employee's personal cell phone number that they take with them. The cloud voice solution that we provide, and it's not expensive, but now you have a business phone number that you own. It goes onto the employee's personal cell phone as an app that they do their business calling through. So they still have their phone, they can still use their personal phone number, but for business purposes, they're calling through a phone number you own, so that when they leave, you retain that data and don't lose perhaps key customer contacts.
Very cool. Okay, a couple of questions here related to costs, Nick, both on the audit, the cybersecurity audit, and on ongoing monitoring. And I guess also on just ongoing service in general, but let's keep it to cybersecurity for the moment.
Okay. So, normally you would never just start throwing out costs, right? Because there's a lot of details and specifics involved. But I'll give you this audience. I'll share some information.
Mm-hmm.
So on the cybersecurity risk assessment, yes, there's a cost to it. It depends. It follows the size of your IT environment. So the let's just use a very simple analogy. The less laptops you have, the less expensive it is. You have a lot of laptops and a lot of servers and a lot of this, that, and the other thing. It gets to be more expensive. So there is a charge for that, and what we do is after the fact, if you engage us to do the remedy and put in place all the proper tools, then of course we just credit the cost of that risk assessment towards the solution. Again, don't hold me to this. I'm going to give all the caveats because it very much depends on the complexity and what's going on in these businesses. But you could see a range of price from roughly $100 to $300 per. We speak in terms of endpoints. So an endpoint is a device. It's a laptop, it's a server, it's a firewall, it's a whatever. So it's not an per employee thing, it's a per device thing. So, hopefully that helps frame it. And just on the voice side, if you want curious about the voice solution is you our product is very similar to other things you would have heard about, like Ring Central, 8x8. The cable companies all sell these voice solutions. Everybody's about the same price. Depending on the features you need, it's like $20 to $30 per month per phone number. So everybody's the same price. And so what I always tell folks about this, if everybody's the same price, why not go with the one that gives better service, which I would say is us, right? If any of you have ever had to deal with Ring Central, you probably hated the experience, or if you dealt with voice solution from the internet service provider, you probably hated the experience. You're never going to talk to a human on any of those situations. So again, I think that's what sets us apart. You can call us, get us on the phone. All of our customers have my phone number, my personal cell phone number. So we're here to help.
Great, Nick. And thank you for sharing a little bit on pricing, underlining that this is a wide range. Don't hold you to it. But you said $100 to $300 per endpoint or device per
month.
What time period? Per month?
Yeah, I forgot to write that out. Yeah.
Yep. Great. Okay. After doing the security risk assessment once, how do we work with you to continue maintaining security processes, and how often should a company do periodic assessments after that initial one?
That's a great question. So what happens is we do the risk assessment, then we put in place all the cybersecurity tools that the business should have, all the 24/7 monitoring, all the endpoint detection, all of that stuff. So then you have this deployed. So your business is constantly being watched, by us and the solution. So that's part of it. It's like, so round the clock from there on out, you're being protected. What we then do, again, depends on the situation, but certainly we want to do quarterly business reviews with you. So where we will update, that might involve doing an additional scan, sharing those results with you. We also do an activity called a penetration test, where on a semi-regular basis, again, depends on how you want to approach it, monthly, quarterly, whatever, we're doing dedicated penetration testing on your network to expose vulnerabilities. So these are the things. Once we start to understand your business more, we will make very specific recommendations about, obviously, you now have 24/7 coverage. Here's how we would like to engage with you quarterly, maybe twice a year. Again, it also depends on what you want and time available to do that. But absolutely, it's not just here it is, see you later. It becomes a very active engagement.
Great. The question is, what kind, I'm going to state the question and then take the liberty of restating it. What kind of risks do you guys see in gyms and boutique fitness studios? So I'll rephrase the question to say, are there certain profiles of businesses that are known for having more security threats? Like, in a gym business, I guess there's like access control, or you got consumers walking around with some the fob on their keychain. I don't know. Are there patterns of types of business that see more or less vulnerabilities?
Sure. I would say these legacy manufacturing businesses are probably number one. That's where you see a lot of attacks being focused on. I forget the statistic off the top of my head, but manufacturing has been the number one attacked industry for the past 5 years, whatever it's been. Obviously there are very simple businesses out there, a gym, an indoor kids playground, whatever it is, where they might just have a few simple machines and the business phone. Okay, sure. There is risk there. Is it business ending risk? Probably not, unless it starts to be something involving money where they can extract money out of the business. That's what I would be concerned about. But, is somebody going to ransomware the indoor trampoline place? Probably not.
AJ asks, I'm considering an acquisition of a small distribution company. Not only is there no security currently, it will need a complete Control-Alt-Delete of all IT to modernize with ERP, AI integration, etc. Does that make it easier working with Inzo if building from the ground up?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I mean, if you have the luxury to go from the ground up and do everything right from the beginning, that's a great approach, right? That's probably easier than trying to fix a bunch of things that were set up incorrectly to begin with. But I'm glad you recognize the opportunity there and are going to get after it. Certainly, we'd be happy to help you. That reminds me of another thing. So when I have individual conversations with searchers and they start asking about all the things that we do, there's one thing that I always kind of carve out that we don't do, and that's things like an ERP implementation or a CRM implementation. And we could certainly help advise you on the selection of those, do kind of a vendor selection activity. But what I always tell folks is once you make your choice, it's just much more efficient for you to have that ERP company do the implementation because they have that service. So they're just going to be much more efficient in terms of time and knowledge and, frankly, expense than if you tried to put somebody like us in the middle of that.
And so, Nick, your focus is communication technologies and cybersecurity.
Yes, everything revolving IT infrastructure, network, data,
Okay.
all the very, very normal IT stuff.
Okay, great. On costs, not of your services, but of cyber insurance, you seem to think that it was worthwhile, although as long as you can adhere to comply with the insurance company's requirements. Can you give us, do you know ballparks of how cyber insurance is priced?
Yeah, so I'm way ahead of my skis here on this one. So definitely go fact check it because it's going to depend on the size and complexity of your business, right? But I would say, for companies in the 5 to 10 million revenue range, it's probably $1,000 a month or so. It's probably on that order. I'm sure we all know Oberly. We've heard that name. That's who I use for our insurance. They've been great for us. They'll be able to give you a very, very good estimate. They're real nice folks, easy to work with.
Nick, plugging a fellow sponsor of Acquiring Minds, very generous. Oberly, Oberle, also based in St. Louis. And sorry, on cyber insurance, the big thing that it covers is the ransoms or just whatever damages related to the infraction.
It covers a lot of different parts. Let's see if I can get back to that slide without driving everybody crazy here. So it'll start to help you with the costs of various different aspects of recovering from that attack. So, you have, if you have a breach, you now have, depending on your industry, certain notification requirements to government agencies, which we always love. Definitely the ransomware, they can help you. I'm not going to say they're going to pay 100%, but if they pay 80%, that's much better than you having to go out of pocket for everything. The business continuity, there is business continuity insurance, but this is specific if your business goes down because of a cyber attack, right? So, your business is shut down, you're losing X number of dollars per day. The insurance can help you recover some of that. I've seen it where it helps with your legal defense and regulatory fines. Again, it's not going to pay all of it, but we're trying to mitigate total damage here. And I've absolutely seen it with one of our customers. Again, they came to us after the attack, but the insurance was paying for the forensic investigation costs. Now, I think they were doing that for a couple reasons. One is the insurance is paying for that to see if they can deny the claim, because they're trying to find out where did they not comply with the policy. And lucky for these folks, they were in compliance. So
Great. Thank you for that. Even though you had already been on the slide. Two more questions. We're at time. So two more questions for you, Nick. The first one, so in search and entrepreneurship through acquisition, buying a business, one of the big themes is that transition period where you are coming in as new owner. It's choppy, it's delicate. You're jumping into a moving river, lot going on, and you really, generally, the conventional wisdom is that you want to have a light touch with respect to change, with respect to your employees. Everybody's a little, sniffing around each other, right? I don't know if Rick, you were there when Nick took over, but maybe you know what I'm talking about. So how do you think about like the timing of all the, a risk assessment and then actually implementing all these changes during transition? How do you prioritize? Just how do you think about that qualitative question of when and how?
yeah, I'm sure we all think about these types of questions very similarly, right? We're going to rank them in our head of, there's all these risk and opportunities in the business that we're acquiring. IT is one of them. There's a lot of them outside of the IT scope that we're evaluating. And I think you just have to rank it in terms of priority about what else is going on in your particular business. I would say, of course, you don't want to cause a lot of disruption, but, if passwords are on the refrigerator, that's something you got to deal with. Hopefully it wouldn't be that disruptive, but, that's a pretty big risk area. That's like business killing risk, shared passwords. So, things like that you get to address, but, switching everybody from AOL to Office 365, maybe that's not in your first 30 days of priorities.
Yeah. Yeah. No, great answer. Yeah. Part of the art of executing the successful acquisition is properly prioritizing those things. And then just finally, Nick, what were you offering complementarily to the audience again?
Yeah.
If you'd
So
repeat
we'll
that.
get this IT due diligence questionnaire. We can get that circulated or just ask me for it directly. And then you would use this pre-close. You gather as much information as you can from the questions that are on this document, send it over to us. From there, we'll generate essentially a due diligence report like you're getting from all your other providers, specific to IT with ranked risk and opportunities that we're seeing at this stage. And then, that can help inform some of the decisions you're making from the previous question. What do I want to knock off when, what's important, what isn't, what's nice to have, all that type of stuff. So if we give you a nice report back, again, no charge for that, just trying to be helpful to the community.
Awesome. That's a great offer. Thank you for that, Nick. Everyone, there for a third time is Nick's email address in the chat. So email him for that directly if you are interested, and then check out inzotechnologies.com. Great presentation, Nick. Rick, thank you for coming and contributing as well. Audience, thank you for coming and for your attention. Great hour to spend on this topic that doesn't get a ton of attention, including guilty on acquiring minds. But I feel like it's growing in the appetite for this information, for the obvious reason that it is important and can be crushing in an already delicate moment in a business's life. So very important stuff. Thanks everyone for coming. Nick, thank you for a great presentation. And this ends the webinar. Bye-bye.